As promised, ladies and gentlemen, week 10 of the National Football League. We said it was going to be one of the worst slates in the history of the National Football League, and turned out we had more game-winning field goals this week than any other week in NFL history. It makes sense, right? When you have bad teams, when you have not great teams, they're going to be close, more low-scoring games. Some of them were high-scoring games. The majority of them were low-scoring games that ultimately comes down to what many people say a non-football player. And you can make an argument after this week, outside of the quarterback position, the second best player on a football team, or the second most important player on a football team, I should say, is the kicker. So without further ado, let's get into week 10. This game was decided by 3 points on Thursday night, Bears over Carolina. We knew going in Bryce Young versus Tyson Bagent. I thought Bryce Young would have his best performance of the season. I was wrong. Carolina looked like a mess. Bryce Young looked scared back there in the pocket. We've seen glimpses and some tape of Bryce Young over the first 10 weeks. Obviously, the week 2 game against the Saints on Monday Night Football. But this was the first time everybody, I think, had a great chance to see Bryce Young. And you noticed it, man. He made some good plays when he stepped in the pocket and found guys. And obviously, the Panthers defense kept doing the ball game because Tyson Bagent wasn't doing much for Chicago. But for the majority of pass blocking snaps, and Kirk Herbstreit made this point on the Amazon broadcast, by the time Bryce Young drops back, I mean, there's defensive linemen all in his lap. He really doesn't have any choice. I think Carolina wants to get back to running the football, though they can't because they don't have a great run blocking offensive line. They need to get another wide receiver outside of Adam Thielen. There were reports out there that they were, looking at Davante Adams, Stephon Diggs, Jerry Jeudy, Courtland Sutton at the trade deadline. Could not make a deal, which again, from Vegas's perspective, which we'll get into as we get to the Sunday night game, it makes sense. But Carolina knows they need to upgrade the weapons for Bryce Young. Listen, I'm still a Bryce Young believer. I think the kid has plenty of talent. I think he has enough talent to be a franchise quarterback in the National Football League. I thought Frank Reich in this tenure with Carolina was going to work a lot better than it did. But at the end of the day here, Carolina's going to start winning games. Maybe not this year, but next year if they don't win games, Frank Reich could be on the outs. If Bryce Young doesn't start winning, that whole thing could be a disaster. I think Carolina's going to win a couple games here. They obviously have some divisional games with the White Atlanta and Tampa, and another one against New Orleans on deck for the second half. Some winnable opportunities. And for Chicago, if Justin Fields comes back, we know he has not won a lot of games, but you have Cole Kmet, you have DJ Moore. I think the Bears are going to win games. I don't think Arizona's the worst team in football anymore. I don't think Carolina is going to be the worst team in football anymore. So we thought going into the year, Chicago may have the first and second picks in the draft. To me, it's looking like they could have the fourth and fifth picks in the draft. And how does that change the Justin Fields outlook? That is the question. Okay, Colts Patriots. This game was ugly. Gardner Minshew struggled, made some key throws down the stretch. Jonathan Taylor, the key touchdown. Obviously, though, the key point from this game in Germany was Mac Jones getting benched on the last drive. Bailey's happy, the fake spike, the interception in a double coverage, pretty much ending New England's season. Now, I picked New England here just like I picked Carolina going into week 10 because I thought Bryce Young would have a bounce back game for the Panthers. I thought Bill Belichick's defense would do just enough to beat Gardner Minshew and the Indianapolis Colts, which they did, except New England did not get in the end zone. And I think it's getting more and more clear if you're New England. They have one for sure winnable game left on their schedule. That's right after their bye. I already have it baked in. They're going to beat the Giants. Who are just a disaster. The Giants are not going to win another game this year. They are pretty much tanking for a quarterback. So will New England. I think the first 2 picks in the draft, we're going to have a preview of it next week, in week 12 when the Patriots take on the Giants. But New England's bad. They need to move off Mac Jones. I don't know what you're going to get for Mac Jones. Probably a 3rd or 4th round pick. I don't know if Mac Jones is a good quarterback. I think he can be a decent backup to an average starter, but I think he needs a lot of protection. I think he needs a lot of help. The last 2 years, I think his mind has kind of been eroded by the fact that he has no wide receivers to work with, by the fact that he does not have a great offensive line, that all New England can really do is run that ball with Ramondre Stevenson and Ezekiel Elliott. So I think that affects New England a lot in a lot of different ways. And Bill Belichick coaching Caleb Williams is an interesting proposition. I don't know how that's going to work if New England moves on from Belichick. Who knows? But New England now, which we thought going into the year, the best bet of the year was an easy New England under 7.5 because of their schedule. I thought they would win some games against the likes of Sam Howell, against the likes of Gardner Minshew, because that's usually what Belichick did. But they couldn't even win those games this year. And so they are flat out getting ready for a quarterback. Then, you guys know I'm based in Cleveland, Ohio. That was the best Browns win of my life, and it includes the playoff game that they beat the Pittsburgh Steelers in the wild card game 3 years ago. That was a game where you're down, what was it, 17-3, 17-6, early pick six, second play of the game. Lamar Jackson goes down, first drive touchdown. Baltimore's rolling. It looks like they're going to blow the Browns out about 37-3. They're even up, 2 touchdowns, 31-17 with 8 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. But this is what we saw out of Baltimore last year. And I'll say it one more time. The Ravens last year were the only team in the NFL to hold a double-digit lead in every single game the first 10 games of the season. Instead of being 8-2, 9-1, 10-0 in that stretch, they ended up going 7-3. That was a sign for concern. Lamar Jackson obviously got hurt. Cincinnati got hot. Bengals won the division. This year, Baltimore became the third least amount of time trailing for 10 games in NFL history, and the two previous were 10-0, and the one behind them is also 10-0. Baltimore, though, is 7-3. Their defense does not know how to close games, and Wyatt Teller and Joe Bitonio and the two backup tackles, one being James Hudson, one being Christian, whatever his name was, on the Browns offensive line, along with Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt and Deshaun Watson, who couldn't hit me on this screen if he tried in the first half, then going perfect in the second half. There was a gritty, grinded out, not pretty, but a great W. Sometimes W's don't have to be pretty. Sometimes W's just had to be a W. Baltimore, there's concern going forward, but they do have Cincinnati in a pivotal, maybe potential game of the year situation here in Baltimore Thursday night against Cincinnati. For the Browns now, that win sets them up in a great and almost beautiful situation here to go on a run with the back of their schedule not being great, which includes Pittsburgh this coming Sunday, for Cleveland to get into the playoffs. And that was a game why they substituted out Baker Mayfield for Deshaun Watson, because Deshaun Watson made the plays when it mattered. And I was the one sitting up here after the Nick Chubb injury occurred week 2 in Pittsburgh, Monday Night Football, saying the Browns will re-sign Kareem Hunt, Jerome Ford. They'll be fine in the run game. And boy, were they fine in the run game, wearing down that Baltimore defensive line in the second half on Sunday. Now, I bet Pittsburgh -3 against Green Bay. They obviously covered. It was exactly how I called it. It was going to be a low-scoring game. Jordan Love was going to struggle, though he was going to make some key plays. Pittsburgh was going to hang around there in the fourth quarter. Kenny Pickett was going to make a couple plays. Pittsburgh was going to barely cover like they do every single week. The Steelers, there's a reason why I have best bet them like out of 10 weeks this year, 6 or 7 times, because I know exactly what I'm going to get from Pittsburgh, and I also know exactly what I'm going to get out of Green Bay. Jordan Love, inconsistent, right? Bad first half, bad second, good first half or bad first half, good second half or bad second half. It is inconsistent with him at that quarterback position. And then Pittsburgh, I know that they're going to stay in it way. I know Kenny Pickett is going to make one big throw to win the game. And that's why the Steelers now, if they beat Cleveland and Cincinnati beats Baltimore, they'll be in first place in the AFC North, which is unbelievable. Speaking of the AFC North, Joe Burrow, he had a bad fourth quarter, 2 bad interceptions. Now, one came after a Tyler Boyd drop that would have gave Cincinnati the lead. But we said Jamar Chase, with him being banged up, with T. Higgins not playing, the Cincinnati offense was probably going to look different. And I was worried about this game because this was a big building block game for C.J. Stroud, who, boy, did he deliver when the time was right. Noah Brown, he's out of Ohio State. He was with Dallas for a bunch of years. He looked like a Pro Bowler as opposed to a fifth wide receiver Sunday. And then obviously Tank Dell, big game as well. Schultz, big game as well. And CJ Stroud, who I said coming out of Ohio State, I did not love. I did not see him make one tight window throw. Though I did say I thought the best game that he played in college was against Georgia in his final game, that semifinal game. And he has come in. Not great offensive line, not a lot of weapons. I would say a little bit better than Carolina, but not by much. And even DeMeco Ryans and this Texans organization took that restart from the Deshaun Watson deal to the Davis Mills saga, who is now obviously backing up Deshaun. Or excuse me, he was not backing up CJ. And Houston just went out there and beat Cincinnati flat out. The Bengals almost had a good comeback. Stroud had a bad interception late, but in the end, Joe Burrow and the Bengals could not execute. And we're seeing this year where Cincinnati, they have moments in the game where they have dry spells offensively. They can still make a run at the Super Bowl once they get everybody healthy. But Cincinnati's one of those teams that cannot afford injuries. And when T. Higgins is out, when Ja'Marr Chase is banged up, they are not the same team. Once again, a pivotal game between Cincinnati, Baltimore this Thursday night. And Houston and Jacksonville are coming up in a couple of weeks. Houston now nipping on the tails of Jacksonville in that AFC South division. Within that division, Will Levis, we said he was going to have good days. He was going to have bad days. Went up against a great defensive minded head coach in Todd Bowles. Baker Mayfield played well. Will Levis cannot do anything. And again, Tennessee. I think Will Levis can win games. I don't think he's the future for you with the quarterback position. I would have dealt Derrick Henry to that Baltimore deal that was reportedly out there at the trade deadline. Tennessee did not. Derrick Henry did not get anything going. And Tampa won the game 20-6. Not I want to say. I said I would take Tampa Bay there because they're the home team, but I know what I predicted. Then Josh Dallas, I said I trust them more than Derek Carr, who ended up getting hurt. Jameis Winston came in, played pretty good in garbage time, and then did what Jameis Winston always does and throws interceptions. This game should not have been as close as it was. Minnesota was dominating the whole game, and all of a sudden, we've said, take a look at Minnesota over the last couple of weeks. They're getting wins against bad opponents. Now they go to Denver, and we'll see Josh Dobbs. A lot of people think this is going to be a bad game. The way Denver's playing, and we'll get to obviously the Buffalo disaster on Monday night. The way Josh Dobbs is playing, I'm pretty excited to see how Minnesota and Denver counteract each other this Sunday night on Monday Night Football. Again, Minnesota defeats the Saints 27-19. Now I said I thought San Francisco was going to bounce back against Jacksonville, and boy, did they ever. I said, I think the Jags are good. I think that they are a product of being in a bad division, which is getting better, but it's not great there yet. I would not take them over Cincinnati. I would not take them over Baltimore. I would not take them over Kansas City. I would not take them over Miami. I don't think right now I'd even take them over Buffalo, even though they beat Buffalo, that was on a neutral field in London. I think it really depends on where the game is at when you're talking about them versus Buffalo or them even versus the Chargers. Trevor Lawrence has not been that generational prospect that we predicted he'd be out of Clemson. He's a very good quarterback. He's a great coach in Doug Peterson, but he, is sort of a product of his environment where he has to have a very good game against bad opponents where the offensive line can sort of protect him, or that Jacksonville defense that does have the most turnovers in the league, because that's the way they stop people. They don't force people off the field. They force turnovers, and they did not force turnovers against the San Francisco team who was angry with everybody back talking them going off a bye. They haven't won a game in a month. That was sort of a buzzsaw there from San Francisco. Again, I think the Jags are still good. I think they're going to win 10, 11 games. I think they're going to win the AFC South division, but they met their match there. They're not there yet with San Francisco physically, and that was almost predictable the way San Francisco manhandled Jacksonville on Sunday, 34-3. Now, this Lions Chargers game was again exactly the way I called it. I bet Detroit -2.5. I said it was going to come down to a final kick. It was going to come down to Brandon Staley's defense not being able to make a stop, even though Brandon Staley is a defensive-minded head coach. I said Detroit was not going to be able to stop Justin Herbert. I said LA was not going to be able to stop Jared Goff, who played a really good game. Amon-Ra St. Brown, another great game. Lions were able to run the ball with not only Gibbs, but David Montgomery as well. Dan Campbell, very aggressive, going for it on fourth down. Offensive-minded head coach, using his offensive line to his advantage. Lions play bully ball against Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, who for some reason in big games in Brandon Staley's scheme cannot make plays. And it's exactly what we predicted. And the Detroit Lions covered the 2.5. And exactly what I predicted in the Arizona game. I picked the Cardinals in the upset over the Falcons. I said Kyler Murray was going to play well. I don't trust Arthur Smith. Taylor Heinicke was benched for Desmond Ridder, who did have a rushing touchdown. Now, Atlanta, they did get Bijan Robinson, a little bit going, not as much as I would like him to be used. And there's this old conversation in the NFL sometimes about, do you have too many weapons? We hear this sometimes about San Francisco. We hear it sometimes about Philadelphia. We don't hear it a lot about Atlanta. But I think it's a case of Arthur Smith has 3 good backs he wants. Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, Cordell Patterson. They have, Drake London, a receiver. They have Kyle Pitts. They have Jonnu Smith, who has a relationship with Arthur Smith going back to his days in Tennessee. I don't think Arthur Smith knows how to use his personnel. I think he wants to use all those backs. He doesn't know how to incorporate Bijan Robinson that well. It's a very short passing game. It's not timed out shots. It's not a great generated West Coast offense because he doesn't know who to get the ball to with and when. Looking back at it, I know they drafted Kyle Pitts and I know they drafted Drake London. If I was Atlanta and Bijan Robinson was the best player on the board, I get it. They needed more help on defense. Now, I would have probably gone, on the defensive side of the ball now, looking back at it. I know there was a lot of talk that they're going to take Bijan Robinson because Arthur Smith, going back to his days in Tennessee again, loves using the running backs with Derrick Henry. But there are sometimes situations where you have too many pieces in one offense. Bijan Robinson's not fitting in Atlanta with those pieces. It's why I didn't trust Desmond Ridder, Taylor Heinicke, the quarterback position this year. It's why I was not a big fan of Atlanta. And predictably, Kyler Murray played well, and Arizona looks like they're going to move forward with him. I think it's a mistake with Kyler Murray's injury history. So if he can stay healthy, again, we all know he's a special quarterback. Joey Schneider last week when he was on the show argued with me that he thought you could get a 4th or a 5th round pick for Kyler. I still think with the quarterback premiums of this year's draft and with Kyler Murray's ability, you could probably get a 1st or 2nd round pick for the young quarterback. Now, Seattle, Washington, exactly what I thought. I said Seattle was going to win at home. I said, Sam Howell was not going to play great for the Commanders, which he did not. I said Seattle was probably not going to cover, which they did not. And again, kind of a weird game, low-scoring defensive game. Both offenses picked it up in the 4th quarter. Seattle only won at 29-26. Washington, I said Sam Howell is going to give you good weeks. He's going to give you bad weeks. He's going to give you about 7 to 8 wins a year. He's never going to get you over the hump. And my biggest takeaway from the Seattle-Washington game is Seattle cannot hang with San Francisco. And then Tommy DeVito just got blasted by the Cowboys. Again, I picked Dallas to cover 16.5. There's no reason even to talk about this game as I talked about with New England. Giants are tanking for a quarterback. They're probably going to have the number 1 pick in the draft, which scares me as an Eagles fan, Brian Dable and Caleb Williams. But that's the direction we are heading. The other New York team was on Sunday Night Football. I picked Vegas plus 1.5 because I said late down the stretch, Vegas was going to run the ball with Josh Jacobs. Aiden O'Connell was going to play well just enough. Devontae Adams was going to have just enough of a big game. And the Raiders defense, which has played a lot better under Antonio Pierce's leadership, was going to get the big stop on Zach Wilson, and that's exactly what happened. When the Jets were moving the ball at will in the first half, they kicked field goals, not touchdowns. The Jets in their last 27 quarters have only scored 1 offensive touchdown, and that was the incredible Bryce Young 50 or Brees Hall, excuse me, not Bryce Young, Brees Hall's 50-yard catch and run that game against the Giants, which was a merciful game to watch a few weeks ago. Listen, we know Zach Wilson is not the answer, even though he does make these incredible no-look passes like the one he made to Lazard, even though he somehow got that Hail Mary off in the last play of the game. We know he's got the biggest arm talent in the world. But Zach Wilson has some Jamarcus Russell-esque qualities. Great arm talent, but he cannot see the field. And Aaron Rodgers is there, and Rodgers trying to teach him, and he looks a little bit like Aaron Rodgers on every single throw he makes. But it's the processing of the information, and the Jets cannot move the football. Garrett Wilson's frustrated. Allen Lazard's frustrated. Teams are keying in on Dalvin Cook and Breece Hall. They're not getting anything going in the run game, and this is just who the Jets are. Aaron Rodgers says he's going to come back by mid-December. I think the Jets are going to be out of it by then. Who knows if that's actually true, because we know how Aaron Rodgers likes to lie about things. But in the end here, Vegas, believe it or not, after the firing of Josh McDaniels, 2-0 with Antonio Pierce, and even after the losses to Tyson Bagent and co., they are in contention for a wild card spot in a loaded AFC. And speaking of a loaded AFC, teams in the AFC West, teams in the AFC East, Josh Allen plays like a wild pony again. Denver, whoever since that week 3 debacle when they gave him 70 points to Miami, their defense is playing a lot better, and they created a lot of turnovers. From the first play to the last play of the game, Denver outplayed Buffalo practically the whole game and should have won this game by 14 points. For Buffalo, something is not working. They are not the same since Brian Daboll left to go to the Giants. Josh Allen's a lot more turnover dependent. I don't know if it's Ken Dorsey's play calling. I don't know if Ken Dorsey's not coaching him hard. I don't know what it is. There's some Carson Wentz right now to Josh Allen, which we saw 2020 Carson Wentz in Philadelphia was not the same ever since he got his head banged up. Josh Allen has not been the same since the start of last year. It's turnovers, it's hero ball, it's just chucking the ball. They don't have a run game, they don't have an offensive line. I don't know what it is about Buffalo because Josh Allen has some of the most talent in the world. He could be a top 3, top 5 quarterback. It's why we predict Buffalo to be Super Bowl contenders every single year because of him, because of Diggs, because of the addition of Kincaid, because of what they add on the defense side of the ball. And Sean McDermott last night could not even get the field goal unit right out there. They had 12 men on the field. It was a massive mistake by Sean Payton. I was saying, kick the field goal on 3rd down. You never want to rush the field goal unit of that special team. It's going to cost you the game. It should have cost Denver the game. Even though Russell Wilson's playing better, Denver, like the Jets, cannot score in the red zone. But unlike the Jets, they're winning games, and they have gotten themselves along with Vegas back in the AFC wildcard contention. And Buffalo may need to run the table or lose just one more game to make the postseason. It's going to make it very hard. You know, James Cook fumbled last night. He was in the doghouse. I think that the culture by Buffalo was built by Sean McDermott, but I don't think he's a championship level coach. I think he's an intermediate, good starter for a team that needs to be on the up and up, but I don't think he can take you to the Super Bowl and win it. I think Buffalo needs a new head coach. I think they need an offensive head coach that will coach Josh Allen hard. Ben Johnson, the Lions head coach that fixed Jared Goff, and we know Goff has not thrown very many interceptions this year, comes to mind as the perfect head coach for me for Buffalo. So in the money line in week 10, I ended up going 9-5. The games I missed were Carolina, New England, Baltimore, Buffalo, and then Cincinnati as well. Out of my 5 best bets, I went 4 for 5 this week. I hit Pittsburgh -3 against Green Bay, hit Detroit -2.5 against the Chargers, hit Dallas -16.5 against the Giants, hit Vegas +1.5 against the Jets. All we needed was for Josh Allen and Buffalo to cover, but the turnovers last night cost us a perfect week in best bets. I am now 102-48 in the money line going into week 11, as well as going into week 11 in best bets. I am 32-49 with 1 push on the year. Like that clip from the Brand Sports Podcast? If so, make sure you go down there and hit that subscribe button. While you're down there hitting the subscribe button, make sure to also hit the notification bell so you never miss another upload. And make sure you check out all the other clips from the Brandon's World podcast right here on YouTube.